So that's extortion. In a few days, Gideon's going to set up a fund to just for lawsuits. I mean, he's a small operation. I mean, he's willing to partner with other people. He's not going to be a 501c until he gets donations to do that, but someone has to do it, so he's going to do it, and we need to get money together really fast and start hiring some attorneys to get these cases before the Supreme Court and challenge Congress and, pay the big brains and the legal people that know how to go before Congress, because certainly they won't let any of us in there. I mean, can you imagine? Even if they gave you 5 minutes to speak, let's say if 100 or 200 people even showed up, 500, 5 minutes each, they're going to want to go home. Half of them don't even show up for Congress every day anyways, and they get paid. There's a lot of things we need to stop, but first we need to stop them from force vaccinating the kids and the old people and, killing us or putting us in FEMA camps. So, the FEMA camps, Israel had Bush build those FEMA camps. Let that sink in, you stupid evangelist out there.
74. Whether or not these SNPs are clinically significant is another question entirely. The fact is, they should have been addressed, rather than suppressed. If the Canadian laboratory falsely classifies the mild strain of swine flu as the lethal Mexican strain, it will have ramifications. The Canadian government is entitled to use criminal law to deal with outbreaks of diseases. Clearly, the government would not be able to claim such a drastic mandate unless the public were led to believe the danger was great. The analysis of the laboratory could also be the basis for the production of vaccine material. If the laboratory has got it wrong, then the vaccine companies are likely to get it wrong. For that reason, the Canadian laboratory, flowing from its obligation as a public health body established to provide scientific excellence and quality assurance, should, at the very least, have given the entire sequence, including the two different polymorphisms, and made it clear that there was a difference between the Mexican and Canadian strain. The laxity at the Canada's National Microbiology, which contains some of the world's most deadliest pathogens, was underlined when Canadian scientist was stopped at the U.S. border after authorities found 22 vials used in Ebola research in his car. Conan Mitchell Yao, 42, was apprehended by U.S. officials as he attempted to enter the United States at the Pembina, ND, border crossing from Manitoba on May 5, 2009. Yao faces U.S. criminal charges for smuggling and is currently in the custody of the U.S. Marshals Service. Yao, working at the agency's Special Pathogens Laboratory on an Ebola vaccine project when his research term ended in January. The head of the lab admitted that Yao 3 and 4 pathogens, such as the swine flu virus, HIV and Ebola virus, and that there was genetic material from the Ebola virus in the material that he took off with. Canada's Public Health Agency did not know the vials were missing until it was contacted by the RCMP, which had been alerted by U.S. Border Services. Plummer said, the matter has also been referred to the Winnipeg Police Service, which has not yet decided whether to lay charges. The National Laboratory did not inform the police about the missing vials. 16. Evidence of the involvement of scientists working for the UK's NIBSC and the CDC in engineering the swine flu. Len Horowitz, expert on emerging diseases who worked at the research faculty at Harvard School of Dental Medicine, has alleged that there is a network of genetic engineers manipulating, mutating, and distributing viruses. In an interview on The Alex Jones Show, Dr. Horowitz urges an investigation of Dr. James S. Robertson, England's leading bioengineer of flu viruses for the vaccine industry, and avid.
I know the report is going it might not seem like it's staying on topic, but it is. It's just that the individual who wrote this report for a certain member of, well, he wasn't really even a member of Congress. Anyways, is being thorough, just kind of showing the history of the incompetence or the criminal cartel between the FDA and the Rockefellers, Rothschilds. Jaw should have been arrested a long time ago. As soon as the Rothschilds said they weren't going to pay back the gold to Americans that they stole to fund their banks back in 33, 34, they should have been arrested for that. There's fraud right there. And can you imagine now? And they should return it to the families. I know our family was owed over $1 million plus interest. Anyways, I'm going to go on for this. My cat's doing it again. She wants some attention, doggone it. She's going to have it.
75. Promoter of U.S. government funding for lucrative biodefense contracts, along with collaborators at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. James Robertson is a scientist in the division of the National Biological Standards Board, NBSB, is a non-departmental public body, NDPB, of the UK government. NIBSC, is working closely with the WHO and other international agencies in developing a candidate vaccine virus and associated reagents that are required by the vaccine manufacturing industry to produce swine flu vaccine. It has been alleged that these suspects helped Novavax, Inc., in Bethesda, Maryland, produce genetically modified recombinants of the avian, swine, and Spanish flu viruses, H5N1 and H1N1, nearly identical to the unprecedented Mexican virus that is allegedly spreading to the United States at the time of this posting. The outbreak was precisely timed to promote the company's new research and huge vaccine stockpiling contracts. Scientists at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, CDC, are implicated through collaborations and publications involving private contracts with Novavax, a company that obtains its biosimilars through CDC Influenza Branch Director Ruben O'Donis and Dr. Rick Bright, previously working with Donis at the CDC, now Novavax Vice President of Global Influenza Programs. Descriptions of this virus is pathognomonic, or diagnostic, of a virus that came from Robertson's circle of friends. Dr. Horowitz charges, no other group in the world takes H5N1 Asian flu-infected chickens, brings them to Europe, extracts their DNA, combines their proteins with H1N1 viruses from the 1918 Spanish flu isolate, additionally mixes in swine flu genes from pigs, then reverse engineers them to infect humans. The end product could only have ended up in Mexico via the United States from Britain in care of the CDC. The CDC had to have sent them to Novavax, where Rick Bright's team is now implicated in a conspiracy to commit genocide, the mass killing of consider people for profit. http://involuntary-survent.blogspot.com/2009/04/dr-len-horowitz-names-specific.html. 17. Evidence vaccinations caused the Spanish killer flu of 1918. The 1918 Spanish flu started in American military Camp Funston, Fort Riley, USA, amongst troops making ready for WWI, taking on board vaccinations, recruit training and all. It eventually killed about 40 million people worldwide. That flu strain only appeared briefly once again, according to the U.S. Atlanta CDC. This was in 1976 and again it struck at the U.S. Army, Camp Fort Dix, USA, amongst recently vaccinated troops, and no one else ever. Fort Dix is known to have been a vaccine trial center, was the world's greatest influenza influenza, scourge. Another well-hidden vaccine disaster. John P. Heptonstall. Medical historians have finally come to the reluctant conclusion that the Great Flu epidemic of 1918 was solely attributable to the widespread use of vaccines. It was the first war in which vaccination was compulsory for all servicemen. The Boston Herald reported that 47 soldiers had been killed by vaccination in 1 month. As a result, the military hospitals were filled, not with wounded combat casualties, but with casualties of the vaccine. The epidemic was called the Spanish influenza, a deliberately misleading appellation, which was intended to conceal its origin. This flu epidemic claimed 20 million victims. Those who survived it were the ones who had refused the vaccine. In recent years, annual recurring epidemics of flu recalled 76. The Russian flu. For some reason, the Russians never protest, perhaps because the Rockefellers make regular trips to Moscow to lay down the party line. Eustace Mullins. In 1918, the U.S. Army forced the vaccination of 3,285,376 natives in the Philippines when no epidemic was brewing. Only the sporadic cases of the usual mild nature of the vaccinated persons, 47,369 came down with smallpox, and of these 16,470